Do we have proof the coronavirus was engineered? The US Air Force prepares for war with China, and why street names in Hungary are infuriating China. That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. For over a year, anyone who suggested the coronavirus leaked from a Chinese lab, let alone was bioengineered in a Chinese lab, was labeled a right-wing conspiracy nut. Listen to the science, you morons. Well, now the science suggests the coronavirus is a bioengineered virus that leaked from a Chinese lab. Surprise! Without getting too much into the science, the COVID-19 pathogen has a genetic footprint that has never been observed in a natural coronavirus. It does have a genetic code seen in coronaviruses engineered in labs, specifically after gain-of-function research. That is, research designed to make viruses more deadly and contagious. Even more damning, when the Chinese lab published a paper in February 2020 with the virus's partial genome, they omitted any mention of the special sequence that supercharges the virus. Now, this special genetic sequence that points to lab engineering was easy to see. In fact, scientists in this report from February 2020 noticed it. The paper says a special protein marker may provide a gain-of-function capability to the virus for efficient spreading to humans. Again, that was in February 2020. Before we even began locking down in the United States. And yet, despite the obvious signs of engineering, and despite Dr. Anthony Fauci signing off on US funding for coronavirus research that took place at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, Fauci dismissed the lab leak theory for months, which is why you had fact checks like this one from last year saying the lab leak was doubtful. It now says this fact check has been updated. Or this one that now says scientific consensus has shifted. How about that? In fact, a report prepared for the U.S. government by the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory found it plausible that COVID leaked from a Wuhan lab. Lawrence Livermore has considerable expertise on biological issues. That report was prepared in May 2020, but it remains classified. But even knowing about the existence of this report is further evidence of the lab leak hypothesis. It's amazing what the media can find out when they actually report on things. And here's a fun fact. A Chinese Communist Party military scientist who got funding from the National Institutes of Health filed a patent for a COVID-19 vaccine in February last year. So a Chinese military scientist could have had a vaccine only a month after the Communist Party admitted there was human-to-human transmission? Good to know. And after a genetically engineered Chinese supervirus that was partially funded by the US killed millions, why did top US scientists, officials, and the media ruthlessly attack anyone even suggesting it came from a lab? Somehow, I think we need more of an explanation than it was Trump's fault. Don't worry, the WHO says they can't force China to give more information on the origin of the coronavirus. I'm so glad Biden stopped us from withdrawing from the WHO. Earlier this week, I did a deep dive on how US media discredited the Wuhan lab leak story on our other channel, America Uncovered. Check it out. Link is below. And after the break, the US is preparing for war with China. Welcome back. The US is preparing for war with China. The Air Force is fanning out jets across the Pacific. You see, most US warplanes have either been stationed in Guam or Japan. So China built up over 1,000 ballistic missiles capable of wiping out those bases in the event of war. So, the US Air Force is spreading out hundreds of warplanes across potentially dozens of smaller bases, thus diluting the striking power of China's rocket force. However, the US isn't prepared for China's contingency plan, to use China's team rocket force to steal America's Pokemon. Gotta catch 'em all. Last week was the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, and Western tech companies had the chance to prove they're on the side of Chinese dictators. According to exiled Hong Kong activist Nathan Law, the Israel-based company Wix shut down a Hong Kong democracy website. That was after Hong Kong police asked them to. Don't worry, Wix said it was a mistake. Get ready to hear a lot of that. Microsoft's Bing search engine came up with no results found for Tankman. They said it was human error. Tiananmen survivor Zhou Fengsuo, whom we've had on the show before, said a live stream commemorating the massacre couldn't be viewed on YouTube. YouTube replied to Zhou, citing a possible technical reason for the video issue. Zhou also said Facebook cut off a live stream of a Tiananmen commemoration, calling it spam. It was a technical error. Look, the only technical error was normalizing trade with China, which is apparently something Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is trying to fight. Here he is at a press conference this week.
I think if you look right now, there is no single entity that exercises a more pervasive, nefarious influence across a wide range of American industries and institutions than the Communist Party of China.
DeSantis signed 2 new bills aimed at countering China.
One of the new laws bans trade secret theft and trafficking and increases penalties for such crimes. Those that steal for foreign regimes will face even higher penalties.
The other bill aims to cut the Chinese Communist Party's access to higher academic institutions by prohibiting them from entering into agreements with the Chinese regime or companies with close state ties. The bills target several different countries, such as Cuba and Venezuela, but China is the main focus. Unfortunately for Ron DeSantis, he's a state governor, not the U.S. president. He can't actually set national policy. But he gets an A for effort, plus an F for Florida. Unfortunately, the Chinese government knows how to play that game too, and they can do it at a national level. I'll tell you more after the break. Welcome back. China is moving forward with a new law aimed at countering U.S. sanctions. China doesn't like the U.S. sanctioning communist officials for genociding the Uyghurs or blocking China from getting certain sensitive technologies. That's why China has been drafting new laws that would allow China's courts to punish global companies for complying with foreign sanctions. Oh no, if they punish U.S. companies too much, they'll pull out of China. Then they won't be cheated, having their technology stolen and their global market share taken by cheaper Chinese knockoffs. They might even have to bring manufacturing jobs back to America. Tragedy. And it turns out China's strategy to punish foreign companies and officials has already backfired in Europe. Back in March, China sanctioned EU officials for sanctioning Chinese officials. And that killed a major investment deal between China and the EU. And speaking of reasons not to do business with the Chinese Communist Party, did I mention the genocide in Xinjiang? Even though China is facing a population crisis because of hundreds of millions of forced abortions during the one-child policy, that doesn't mean trying forced abortions in Xinjiang won't be a good idea. New Chinese birth control policies could cut between 2.6 to 4.5 million births of the Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities in southern Xinjiang within 20 years. And a proposed Chinese-funded university in Hungary really backfired for the Chinese regime. First, thousands protested against it. Then the mayor of Budapest decided to do some inventive street renaming in the capital. One street will be named after the Dalai Lama. Another will be called Uyghur Martyrs Road. A third will be called Free Hong Kong Road. And a fourth street will be renamed after a Chinese Catholic bishop who was jailed. Which tells us something very interesting. The global elite may like the Chinese Communist Party, but your average people, and often your local politicians, really don't. And now, it's time for me to answer a question from a member of the China Uncensored 50 Cent Army, fans who support us and our efforts to expose the truth about the Chinese Communist Party by contributing through the crowdfunding website Patreon. Oliviero Gubelman asks, "Hi Chris, would you consider writing a book about all the CCP's dark secrets and its history of mad ideas and policies?" I'm glad you asked, Oliviero. I was actually talking with Man Shelley about this the other day. We've been making this show for almost 9 years now, and we've learned a lot about the Chinese Communist Party and its actions against democracies around the world. So I had the idea, what if we wrote a book? It could be a digital book, that would be pretty simple to do, but I guess that all depends on you. Those of you watching, would you be interested in buying a book we write? Would you want it to have some humor? Tell me in the comments below what kind of book you'd like to see. Thanks for bringing it up and for your support, Oliviero. And a big thank you to everyone who supports China Uncensored on Patreon. We could not do this show without you. So thank you for joining us in the fight to expose the Chinese Communist Party to the world. If you're interested in joining, head over to patreon.com/China Uncensored. You'll get a bunch of cool perks, including the chance to have me answer your question on the show. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.